the Moscow Urban Forum, and we are going to have the most joyful discussion. This is a discussion about happiness and about how we can keep this sentiment, this feeling, and how we should continue to live in this a country which had the best ever World Cup, as Mr. Trump said. We are not going to lose any more time, and we will start right now. My name is Ksenia Chudinova, and please do not hesitate to ask questions after our introduction meeting. So we would like to assess the results of the World Cup for Russia and other countries, for Moscow and other cities. Hello, you are welcome. Please come here. Nikolai, I will invite you to the seat. That's a very good seat. And I'm introducing the members of our discussion panel. And when we started talking about the effect produced by the World Cup, how do we consolidate this status? Because the success has left, as the saying goes, but we would like the fun to continue. We want to live in this joyful world, and our guests today are Mr. Gulayev, Alexander Zaitsev, Mason Delos, Sergei Kuznetsov, Chief Architect of Moscow, Mikhail Kusnirovich, Chairman of Moscow Dichelekia, Alexei Novikov, President Habitatum, and Anna Serebrennikova, Chief of the Operational Block of Megaphone. And I would like to start by asking Nikolai Gulayev. Hello, Nikolai. This is the Director of the Department of Sports and Tourism of Moscow. So what do you think? We all have a good feeling, but inside the department you probably also saw some drawbacks and shortcomings. Maybe something you didn't like. And maybe you saw something to which we do not normally pay attention. And also, the most important issue, did the city's economy benefit from this? Have we already felt any effect? Thank you for your question. I will have to upset you because we didn't have any shortcomings or mistakes. We tried to do our best, we prepared for that, and that's not just my opinion, that's the opinion of Mr. Infantino, FIFA president, who said that Russia conducted the best World Cup held throughout the history of this event. Talking about economics or the effect provided by the World Cup. The number of guests did not change considerably compared to the previous year. The structure changed, about 50 to 60%. That's the rise in the number of guests from far away foreign countries. And that's about 1,200,000 people. And what is the most important issue, and this is our undeniable achievement? Many of the city's guests want to come back here again. And as Vladimir Putin said recently, all the World Cup fans that have a fan ID can use a visa-free entry to the country until 2018. And I believe that this will result in more guests coming to Russia and of course to Moscow, among other cities. I would not like to talk about the financial results of holding the World Cup. It's not completely my zone of responsibility. This is what my colleagues are responsible for. I'll just tell you that we saw those numbers, we're aware of them, and this is a considerable contribution to the city's economy. Thank you very much. We will ask you more questions. Sergei Kuznetsov, hello. My name is Ksenia Chudinova. Of course, impressive infrastructure has been prepared for the World Cup. And a lot of things prepared for the World Cup raised considerable criticism from the city dwellers, from the architects. What are you doing with our city? That kind of criticism. And now it's clear why we prepared all of that. So what's going to happen with all this infrastructure now? And of course, this is relevant for the Luzhniki Stadium and also for developing the city environment. What was the effect assured by the World Cup? It's not even a presentation, it's a kind of video. Because the Zaradia Park has become the most visited site according to Yandex, even in front of Kremlin. And I will just add a few words. First, we need to understand that what Moscow has done and what it continues to do, it's not for the World Cup, unlike many other cities. Moscow just used the infrastructure it already had, mostly. Take the Central Railway Ring, which was launched before the World Cup. It was used during the World Cup, but it was not started because of the World Cup. As for the stadiums, well, the Luzhniki Stadium would not be reconstructed without the World Cup, but it's clear that the stadium that we had before could not meet the requirements. It was long outdated and not good enough for serious matches. So it was high time to reconstruct the stadium, and it was good that it coincided with the World Cup. And at the same time, we got the best football arena in the world, and of course we do need such an arena for top matches. Before that, there were a lot of clubs who played on the stadium. Right now, there are clubs who have their own great stadiums. But this is a stadium which can house a lot of guests, a lot of fans. And there's also a large territory around it, which was created for the World Cup, but it would be done even without that. Because Mr. Sabanin has been working on that throughout his career, and this territory did not become an exception. This is another public space. An embankment has already been finished, regardless of the World Cup, and it is still being actively used. So, in general, my colleagues prepared this concept, and there was the section regarding legacy. I think people here are aware of that. And in general, stadiums are not built for a certain event. They are built as a legacy, and then they get adapted for the event. That's what we did this time. And I should praise my colleagues who are real professionals. We had a lot of great feedback from all the fans, from all the experts who know a lot about football. So I hope that we will be using this stadium actively in the future, and it will be reconstructed again by our successors, by the next generations. And let's watch the video. That's a very impressive video, a great one. And I would like to add something to what Sergei said regarding the use of the stadium Luzhniki after the World Cup. That will be the most important home arena for the Russian national team, as well as a platform for large-scale cultural events. One of them will be in August, a concert of a great globally known group, Dragons, Emerging Dragons. I would like to ask you a question about a phenomenon that is Nikolskaya Street. And this became a great surprise for everyone, that Nikolskaya became a central place like this. Actually, this was an accident. Everyone wanted to go to the Red Square, but now that we have some colleagues who live their own life and they do not have anything to do with the World Cup, and they closed this event, but actually some people started to close the park, this park. I don't want to criticize anyone, but I believe that some colleagues closed more territories than it was strictly necessary. And as a result, quite by chance, Nikolskaya became one of those most common public spaces. I should say that I am a great football fan, and I remember that usually when you go to a stadium, you have to be there 1 hour and a half in advance, and then it's very difficult to leave the stadium. And it turns out that you can leave and quit and enter stadiums as in Europe quite normally. It was not really sudden. That's the result of a lot of work, mistakes correction if you want. But when we did the first test match with Argentina team, we had a lot of difficulties, a lot of things went wrong, not as we had planned, and there were concerns voiced by many that it's difficult to leave the Luzhniki Stadium, and there will be problems with the exit. And I should say that all the 7 stadiums that took place on the Luzhniki Stadium were held when all the stadium was fully occupied, and both the entrance and the exit of the fans were very quick, very expedient, comfortable, and even more comfortable and faster than on many European stadiums. And the question was to both of you, and I can say that after the reconstruction, this stadium cap is one requirement of FIFA, and our speed is about 8 minutes for 80,000 people, and that's very quick. You were probably at Luzhniki, and you probably remember the old Luzhniki. And the principle that you remember that was there earlier was the multi-entrance apartment building, which was very inconvenient for both entrance and exit. And right now, we have opened a part of the stadium between the wall and the cap, and the capacity grew about tenfold. It's a completely different world now, and the throughput capacity allows people to enter and leave the stadium easily. It's not because we are so talented, but it's also that. But there are also FIFA requirements, and one challenge was to invent how to do that, to find the way, because one problem was the capacity, and in this situation it was very difficult to provide for new entrance and exit capacities. So it was really a challenge. It was a kind of puzzle, but as a result we succeeded. I would like to ask Alexei Novikov. You have conducted a survey. You compare the dynamics of sales in Moscow compared to the ordinary Moscow day. How did the rhythm change in the city? What special features did you see? Did you see any change in the mood? How did it affect the habits of Muscovites? And how did it affect the fans? Thank you very much for your questions. First of all, I would like to congratulate everyone who participated in preparing this World Cup. It's really a fantastic World Cup. And it was so inspiring to see what the city is capable of. We had started to prepare for this event a long time ago. We looked at the data of mobile operators such as Beeline, and we also have the fiscal data operator, who also allows us to see the expenses at every point of the city, how much cash was accepted at those points.
And we started preparing from St. Petersburg, from the Confederation Cup. We tried to portray here foreign fans that, and by the way, the horizontal part is St. Petersburg map, and on the left part you can see the concentration of fans during the match and after it, and you can see this gap during the match. They're all at the stadium, and then they are starting to spread around. But what's crucial for us is not just the concentration, but to integrate the commercial capacity of a place. I mean, what the place can generate if there is a concentration of fans there. That's the match of Russia, between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and the beer consumption during the match and after it. You can see here that during the match we see the latent structure of the city, and we'll never understand why people gather there. We will have to answer this question regarding the food and beverage consumption. The number of services in Moscow increased by 50%, within the Sadovaya ring by 60%, within the Boulevard ring. So, sometimes the commercial capacity of a place increased by 2 times, in other cases by 50%. This is the Bolshaya Dmitrovka Street. and the consumption of beer during the time of the match. The gap here is the night time. Otherwise, we can see that the efficient use of the city space increased by 3.5 hours. That's huge, in particular in terms of the income generated by the space and also from the point of view of our infrastructure that was required. This is quite a funny picture. It is static, but you can see the most important emotional reaction centers during goals. That's Russia, Spain, score 1-0. You can see here that the university site did not display any emotional reaction. It all shifted to the center. And in that respect, the situation is quite interesting because it somewhat reflects the perception of the city structure by the fans during this event. And we will probably have to continue thinking about it later. That's what I wanted to say. So the effect is quite stunning. We believe that we accumulate this data and thus we can study the metrics. And this is just the beginning. And we will probably have a special report dedicated to it because a match is for us a way to understand the urban fabric. I see that you have a comment. It's not a comment, it's rather an explanation why that site was empty. Because the main site of the fan fest was quite close, and during the Russia-Spain match, there were 100,000 persons there. Speaking about the fan zone, the additional fan zone at Spartak Stadium for the Russia-Croatia match, they were visited by 2 million fans, so you can make the conclusion. I would like to specify that it's not the people concentration indicator, because maybe there was a lot of people there, but that's the indicator of the emotional reaction. I mean, how people share their feelings during various social media. Okay, thank you. Perhaps I cannot hear your comment. Well, maybe internet was not working. When there are too many people, sometimes the mobile connection does not work. Maybe it's time to give the floor to the megaphone company representative. I believe that you are among the ones who made sport fashionable in our country, and I wanted to ask you, how do you see what the World Cup did to us? What are your impressions? But let's not forget about megaphone. We will soon speak about the breakdowns, but actually there were no breakdowns. But first I'll give the floor to Mikhail. I congratulate all of you because we've had a lot of successes. The World Cup has been so successful, and we receive a lot of congratulations from abroad. 1 month, Russia was in prime time, and it was positive, and it was quite unprecedented, and that's a very revelatory story for the whole country. Of course, we don't want to say that all these bourgeois had a wrong idea about our country before that. However, in many cases, they thought indeed that we are evil and not high-tech and so on. And this was quite a joyful revelation for them, and thus they were happy to congratulate us, even those who came here specifically to find something negative. Throughout the World Cup, I communicated closely with Gianni Infantino and his family, and they were so happy. And it it was so nice to see these successes in spite of everything. I'm not being very scientific focused now. I'll give you an example. Big brands have always been accompanying sports events. Omega since 1932, Coca-Cola from 1988 and 28, and so on. And even the luxury brands such as Louis Vuitton would also like to participate, so there is a lot of emotional interest. And all the time, without any exception, at all the Olympics, sales of those brands plummeted at all the World Cups. So they thought that probably the wrong buyers came and they were not buying. The figures are the following here. The Louis Vuitton sales increased by 2.5 times. So the trunk played its role, right? Do you mean the trunk, I mean the box for the FIFA World Cup? That was stored for a while on the Red Square. Or we're thinking about the Louis Vuitton trunk. There are also luxury brands such as Van Cleef and Arpels and Cartier. They also witnessed an increase in their sales by several orders of magnitude, by around 2.5 times. And our successful stores such as Bosco witnessed an increase by 3.5 times. Bosco Cafe by 4 times. We said that Zaradia was the epicenter. How many people were there in Zaradia? I don't know the figures. Approximately. How many millions? I don't know how many people the World Cup accepted, but I can say that as of today, Zaradia's throughput was around 10 million. Do ask that, because I have to insist that the epicenter was the Central Universal Store, GUM, which is located closely to Zaradia. 2,300,000 persons visited GUM in 1 month. Here are our measurements from the 14th of June to the 15th of July. 2,300,000. Why the Red Square was closed for a while? First, there was the Day of Russia holiday. Then the football park had to be built on the place of the ice rink in 6 days, and every day there was from 55 to 67,000 people who played football, ping pong, and so on. So, of course, it is unprecedented success, and the Nikolska Street also represents a double phenomenon, because it is in addition, a sort of addition to the Red Square. When I went there, it was very difficult for me to walk there, but it was so interesting to plunge into all those emotions. Everyone was absolutely happy, from Mexicans to Peruvians. Well, they're close to each other already, let's say from Croatians to French. They're also close. Well, the difference is 2 goals. What I want to say is that everyone was there. And actually, regarding the beer consumption indicators, these were the Germans. They drank all that beer, and it was clear how it would influence your performances. They were too sad, so they drank a lot. And how many people were there? From million to million 200,000. So the increase was quite big. Uh, I think that people even had to fight a little bit for ice cream. We've always had very low prices. We've had the ice cream price of 50 rubles for 15 years, and we had to increase prices for ice cream just a little bit until up to 100 rubles. And the turnover increased by 6 times. So even the ice cream was very high in demand, and that is very good. And it's very difficult to maintain those performances. We have experience of 8 Olympics when in different cities we took an active part: Salt Lake City, Athens, Beijing. And later we came to those cities, and when I came there I felt sad because in Athens during the Olympics it was so nice. Calatrava organized beautiful Olympic parks there, and tramway, in contrast to our Moscow Central Railway ring, was built for the Olympics, and after the Olympics it was not used at all. It became abandoned. And Luzhniki is just the best stadium. That's a compliment. I live nearby, and we were afraid that it would be reconstructed or revamped because the FIFA requirements were 85,000 people capacity, and we managed to convince them, let's do as it was in Berlin, let us preserve the historical stadium, and that's a very good solution. I went to 5 stadiums during the World Cup. They're all very good. Sometimes they're a bit similar, but Luzhniki is higher than everything, let alone Maracana, San Siro in Milan, and so on. Believe me, I'm also a fan for many years, and I've never been to a more comfortable and quality stadium. Allianz Arena in Munich, the stadium in Berlin, all of that is good. It's like Spartak Stadium. These are stadiums of the same level, and Luzhniki is quite a unique one. It's so nice to be there, and Muscovites and tourists, please do come there. You can even come there freely. Today you can cycle there or run there, and as of today it's not so crowded as other interesting sites in Moscow. It's so nice there, so please come. And we are all so lucky. The whole World Cup has been receiving positive feedbacks, and today coming to Zaratia I also feel very positive, because Zaratia is a project that is very nice in terms of urban development. It's so comfortable. You really want to come back there, and it's quite complex to make a positive impression after the World Cup, but you managed it. Thank you. Can I ask a question about the ice cream? Did you return the prices back to 50 rubles from 100 rubles? We'll see, because I love ice cream so much. So you will not afford it for 100 rubles. Okay, we'll reduce the prices to 50. Okay, let us now address Alexander. Alexander, can you please speak about the restaurant area? What happened there? I got stunning releases at the beginning of the World Cup. The airkeeper company sold it to me, sent it to me, and the waiters were according to this system, and they calculated fantastic revenue that restaurants and cafes in Moscow should receive. Was it indeed like that? We are operating Turandot, Cafe Pushkin, Kazbek. We also work in the democratic segment. It's the Mumu chain of cafes. But I am one of the few who mentioned to see the whole process from within, because we serviced the World Cup in terms of food. I have to say that your turkey cutlets were very nice. Thank you. I would like to thank Mr. Kuznetsov as a professional, because all the infrastructure, all the internal infrastructure that many of you will probably not see was planned in an ideal and very professional way. Fantastic elevators that work in the regime that you need, actually. And that is why all the technical issues were smooth. Ensuring food to 14,000 guests was quite a challenge, because it was unprecedented in terms of such a number of guests. We've never welcomed such a big number of VIP guests. 14,000 is a lot. So cooking there, taking into account the heat that was in the city but not in the stadium. So I'd like to thank you for that and to express my respect, because you don't see such facilities even in hotels and restaurants. I'll get back to Luzhniki Stadium, but first a couple of words about restaurants. I managed to communicate with hundreds of guests over that period, and I have two interesting conclusions. First conclusions, I think that the city is very clean. Second, the city is very delicious. And here we can see long-term prospects for ourselves, because every guest is sort of an ambassador, goodwill ambassador, culinary will ambassador, who will speak about how delicious the city is to his friends. The city is indeed delicious, because we made a lot of effort, we prepared to it, and not just ourselves. We trained personnel, we taught languages to them. But actually, we often should not have made such an effort, because the Latin American tourists actually did not master English as well as we imagined.
And the long-term prospect in Moscow's development is that it will be a tourist center, because we have something to show: that's history, architecture, urbanism. But it's not only that. We would like the gastronomic capital to be one of Moscow's faces, and we have everything for that. We have talents, we have great cooks, great chefs. We have people who love this job, and we believe that step by step, in the long-term future, we will be able to make Moscow one of the chief gastronomic products. Because right now Moscow is probably within top 10, but not top 5 in the world in these terms. But after the World Cup, we have everything possible to get into top 5. The World Cup also showed that we can amaze with our product. The propaganda before the World Cup including all the stereotypes, even those that said that there is nothing to eat in Russia, there is nothing to drink in Russia, but all those stereotypes were broken. It was discovered that we have a lot of delicious things, such as cheese and many other things. It's not only about the recipe, it's about the products that our farmers grow. And a lot of things depend on the products. If products are high quality, the entire restaurant industry develops. So I believe that this was the first step for promoting the Russian agriculture, that is, the imposition of sanctions. And the World Cup gave us a new impetus, because we thought that we would have to explain for a lot of time what products we had, and we couldn't do without experts. But right now we had great advertising throughout this month, and we were able to show everyone what great prospects we have for this industry, for agriculture and the food industry. Another factor which will help us in the future, that is digitalization. Which people used when seeing the sites, when working in the video conferences and video chats. We have a lot of new subscribers, maybe even several thousand more subscribers than we expected, than was provided by our plans. And thanks to those ambassadors, the fans of football became kind of ambassadors for the entire restaurant industry of Russia. They showed to all the world how delicious Russia is. And thanks to that digitalization, and that concerns particularly the Chinese market, we expect that each subscriber who was interested in that is almost our potential tourist or potential customer. So those are the three strategic things that we are expecting, not within the next few years, but even sooner. I think we will have to improve our forecasts and we will have greater tourist flows. As for the long term, of course, there have been long queues, particularly in the Pushkina cafe. People had to wait for a lot of time, but people also had fun, they enjoyed it. They exchanged opinions. And we tried to provide people with everything necessary, such as water, umbrellas, and so on. And of course, this is about a completely different number of people that we got. It's not even interesting to look at it in the short-term view. In terms of long-term view, we have a brilliant future. What about those two menus, the Russian and the English one, with different prices? There were just two items. I know only about two cases that took place. Of course, it was not smart, because no smart restaurant would ever do this. But I think it was all about discussion rather than the amount of facts, because there were a lot of discussions and debates about it, but the number of cases was really small as for the amount of work that we did. And that's 14,000 guests, 7 matches in a row. That's a real ordeal. That's the check of ourselves, our capabilities, our supplies, and the entire infrastructure. and I think we did quite well. So we are trying to use this experience for ourselves. And of course, we are going to do things differently after we get this knowledge. Thank you very much. When we start talking about digitalization, 11 cities hosted the World Cup. So how many years have you prepared this World Cup? What about Megaphone, which ensured all communications, which communicated all the data? I know that you have some slides, so I would really love to watch it, to see it. Yes, of course, I will tell you about it with great pleasure. I already have the clicker. And right now, football is about, it's all about digital. It's about exchange of information, the TV set broadcasting. There's even the arbiters that watch reviews through the VAR system. And the good news is that the infrastructure was good enough for all the loads. We worked under the contract with the Ministry of Communications and we ensured the technical component of the World Cup according to FIFA requirements. We worked on this for 2 years. We have a lot of experience in infrastructure projects. We were the technical partner of the Olympiad, the Sochi Olympiad. So we can compare how many Olympiads we have at the World Cup. The number of countries grew. Infrastructure grew fourfold or maybe fivefold. But most of all, the traffic grew. And the number of minutes that people spent talking to someone. Even compared to the World Cup of 2014 in Brazil, traffic grew tenfold. It was 50 terabytes, and now it's 500 terabytes, because the infrastructure permitted it. Secondly, there is a different content that is consumed, and our clients are very choosy. As soon as we give more speed, it is used at once. When we allow them to watch more videos, it's also used. Our network was loaded by almost 100% in the rush hours. Fortunately, normally we had a lot of reserves. And we foresaw that we would need those reserves, because sometimes there are some issues. The fiber is cut off, for example, but we had 2 or 3 backup systems according to FIFA requirements. And of course, it's the peak loads. That's when people start talking, and when we win, people start exchanging videos and photos, and when we lose, people talk. So it's better to share a picture or a video when all is good. When all is bad, it's hard to share a picture. People prefer talking. This is our rating for different parameters. The most rapid stadium is Luzhniki, 293 megabits per second. And the most talking stadium is Samara Arena. People who went to the Volga region love to talk. The most downloading stadium, that's the amount of data downloaded by the networks. And in terms of attendance, that's the Moscow Stadium as well as the St. Petersburg Stadium. The greenest stadium was Rostov Arena, and we are proud of that. We weren't aware that we had so many fans in Rostov. I'm talking about megaphone fans, and that's very indicative data. As for foreign fans, we have interesting data. And that's the data of our network. And that's not the passport data. That's the data of their mobile phone numbers. Right. We had a lot of US citizens, some Mexican fans, who also use US telephone codes. Of course, there were a lot of fans from China, from Israel. Israel is also among the leaders. And in terms of data consumption, we can see that the developed countries use a lot of data transfer. Did people buy any SIM cards in the airport, or did they prefer walking and living with their own SIM card without changing it? You know, the telecom market is very competitive all over the world, which is why a lot of Western operators had an agreement with Russian operators that they would have their home tariffs, which is why there weren't so many sales of SIM cards. A lot of people still used their home numbers. They just used the reduced tariffs provided by their home operators for the World Cup. We had such a contract with TNT, the US market leader, which partially explains our data for the number of guests. We can sort through this data for a lot of time. That's a wealth of information. In terms of accepting the greatest number of foreign guests, Moscow and St. Petersburg are at the top, followed by Kazan and Sochi. And Moscow and St. Petersburg have an almost equal number of foreign visitors. They are both great points of attraction. As for the most popular matches, it's all really expected. The most popular matches for foreigners. The winners, however, were the semi-finals England, Croatia, and France, Belgium as well was the leader and a point of attraction for foreign guests. In terms of the technical features of the project, we have a lot of technical victories in terms of speeds. The number of facilities that we prepared to support the fans. You asked us how many people were involved by us, and the answer is 2,000 engineers, which is a very valuable experience. And this is an exportable experience, because technical support of such events is a great competence that no one else in the world possesses, and Russia has this experience. And this is a great piece of news for us in terms of holding mass-scale infrastructure projects of any level. And I agree with my colleagues. We need to maintain that level of positive energy that we were able to accumulate during the World Cup. It was so nice to hear that our stadiums will be taken by big events, will host big events. Our country, Russia, is able to host any kind of events. We tested technologies of different generations in different cities in various formats. Our ambition was for Russia to become the digital champion of the world. And 5G networks is another area where we can make a breakthrough and become the global leader. That's it for me, thank you. Thank you. I'll ask you a brief question. Some of the speakers have said today several times we did something under the requirement of FIFA. The stadiums were rebuilt according to FIFA requirements. Of course, we need to work with the stadiums as well. But I wonder, What about the future? What about the requirements of the residents of the country? Were they taken into consideration? Did the Russian citizens have any particular requests? And what will we see in the future in that context? I would like to ask Sergei the First. City dwellers are always unhappy about something. They keep criticizing everyone on Facebook. Yes, that's a process which goes on forever and ever. But I should say that now that foreigners really appreciated everything that happened here, I hope that Russian citizens will love it as well. Sometimes some people prefer criticizing, but I think it will be better now for us after the World Cup, because we have more interaction with the Russian people, because we all looked at the evaluation from the outside. A lot of things were criticized, but now there is a lot of enthusiasm about those things. There was criticism about Zarядye Park, about the Luzhniki Stadium, about their planning and renovation of the Luzhnikov territory. It was almost a war. People were so aggressive, they were so against the World Cup. The launch of Luzhniki, there were so many scandals about a tree being chopped down. When we were talking about such serious changes. And I think the World Cup gave us a really positive evaluation. People will now have more trust about what's happening now after this evaluation. As for FIFA requirements, yes, of course, these were FIFA requirements, but Moscow did a lot regardless of the World Cup. It so happened that all the changes were so convenient and comfortable. People used the railway transport, the taxis, and of course the World Cup infrastructure as well. So first of all, we did this for ourselves. The park was done not for the guests, but for ourselves. But when the owners of a house love their house, guests also love it. That's it. Thank you very much. Great. You know, it's very important to be humane, to love other people. And that's the most important thing. And there were a lot of young people aged 18 to 20. And Latin Americans are so sensitive, they liked crying a bit about losing after losing. And our boys and girls who were ready to console those fans whose team lost. You see, so when we feel bad, we can talk. That's it. Hello, my name is Fyodor Kurat. I am a festival producer and a cinema producer. You have mentioned the involvement of many sides. The local residents got a lot of positive emotions thanks to this event, thanks to this sports event. And I think right now people are looking forward to further events, not only concerts, but even big festivals. We don't have enough events in the country. Most of all, it's sports events. But what about events where a lot of foreign visitors come, such as the cultural events? There are not so many cultural events in Russia, and I think Moscow and St. Petersburg will now want to have more events next year where tourists will come.
We already do have the necessary infrastructure. We have not just stadiums, but hotels, cinema halls, and good premises where good events could be hosted, but there are no events. What do you think about that? Thank you. I would like to say at once something about electronic festivals, but Mikhail, you know, I don't quite agree with you, because we got two pleasure, not from the event, but thanks to the fact that all of our guests liked it and we liked it, and we had something to be proud of, and we started wanting to invite people, not just for the birthday, but just like that. You go to Venice not just to the Biennale or the cinema festival, but because it's interesting there, because it's delicious. It's not so hospitable as Moscow is, but you go there because it's Venice, Rome, Paris, or London. So the maximum that we achieved is that whatever happens, it's nice to come here and spend part of your life here, because we are pleasant and hospitable guys, because we sincerely want to please people, because Maison Delos prepared everything for the sad fans whose teams did not go out of the group. So give us an event if you are a representative of cinema industry. I, as an organizer of many events, have a lot of work already. Moreover, other cities can indeed reach the performances of Moscow and St. Petersburg in terms of various events organized. Moscow and St. Petersburg are already full of events. There is a huge number of exhibitions. The museum quarters are developing. There will be a museum quarter, including Tretyakov Gallery, the Pushkin Museum, Vinzavod is also another cluster that is developing. Even Flacon cluster. So, indeed, there is a lot of life around. And of course, there are things to see here. But it was like that before. Why people were afraid to come here? They thought that the environment was aggressive, but it turned out that the environment is quite welcoming, and that's the main turnaround, and that's what we should continue working on, so that our police officers smile, so that our waiters don't say, there are a lot of you here and I'm alone, to the guests. That's also important. We are doing that not just for ourselves. We are all trying to justify things, to say that all of that is not important. No, I sincerely believe that it's important to do things well, first of all, for the city, and people will like it. For the city, it's important to be loved by the Moscow residents, by the local electors, as well as by those who come. I am speaking about the same thing. There is no controversy here. The controversy is that we don't have to be troubled by the fact that the world is falling in love into us. Yes, but we are doing this for ourselves. The Venice residents built Venice for themselves, not for the tourists. We built the radio for ourselves, and everyone likes it. What's bad in that? I don't think that you can do something on purpose to please. Girls, could you tell me, when you go out, you look in the mirror, you apply lipstick and mascara. You do it for yourself, but also to please. What's bad in that? We take into account the international image of the country, and we do some things that are not just about architecture, but there are special competitions, specially invited people, specially invited architects. As a result, a certain quality level will be achieved, and a park will be built for the international community in particular. When I come from any foreign trip, from London, for example, people say that they don't know a lot about Moscow except for Zaryadye Park. So it is important for people to know about it, to discuss that. But still, I believe that we should focus on the local consumption. So it's about public-private partnership. It's intriguing to speak about the private actors and the authorities. Well, maybe someone else has questions so that they can come, and then we will wrap up. Nikolai, what about the events? Yes, it's about bread and performances. If we see the agenda of Moscow, it is indeed very busy. And if something is missing, do that, and we will sell it abroad. Later we will invite people to come so that they can see this cool product. But first it has to be created and then raised up to such a level so that people come to see it. For example, I love very much the Festival of Arts that is taking place in Edinburgh. The budget of the festival is 13 million euros. A million tourists come there. In Australia, there is a very powerful festival of art. But when you address the Ministry of Culture, you see that they often support different projects. And for example, there is the Moscow Cinema Festival, and 300 persons only come, not 300,000. So the event is organized, indeed, but we need to assess and calculate how many people come there. Even the international press doesn't come there. It's an international event, but there is no international press. It's not professional, right? So we should probably adopt a different approach. We are now starting a rather professional discussion, but these are matters related to the organization level. I think the level is in general very high, both of the speakers and of the format of the subjects discussed. So it means that we can do a quality product. Let us do it. Our goal, as I have already said, is to promote it. To continue with the subject Alexander has mentioned, it's a very delicious city and one of the areas that we can promote. One of the tourist products is gastronomic tourism. So let us do it even better together. Today it's very high in demand. And having such an infrastructure, it would be foolish not to use it. Yes, we don't have Michelin star restaurants, but it does not influence at all the number and quality of good restaurants. There's yet another explanation why it's like that. There are indeed a lot of events. If you consider the museum figures and the exhibition figures, Serov exhibition in the Tretyakov gallery, for example, the figures are stunning. But it's difficult to compare big cities and smaller cities. It's difficult to compare Edinburgh to Venice and to Moscow, and those events, they are have a different scale, and if you organize the same event in Moscow, it will dilute. New York, for example, is a big city as well. There are a lot of things that are happening there, but there is no single festival that New York is known for. It's because of the scale of the city. We always need to assess the per city event. The next session, by the way, will be dedicated to cultural events. You can remain and listen to it. So there is this effect due to the scale of the city. But Moscow indeed has a busy agenda, that's for sure. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the speakers and audience. It was very interesting, and I'm convinced that we will preserve our hospitality towards ourselves and the others. Thank you.